Good evening, day walkers and night stalkers. Happy Halloween month. Halloween is not just on the October the 31st, one day of the month. It is the entire month of October, so we are now officially in Halloween season. It's kind of like being in Louisiana in the month of February. It's Mardi Gras season all month. So, hey, that's how we roll right here. There's my boy Freddie. Hey, honey. This one's for you, sweetheart. I'm so going to miss you this weekend. I'm bummed out that you're not going to be there. I'm hoping that the coast is still going to be there, though. We're keeping an eye on that storm. Hi, Crystal. Glad to see you hopping on board tonight. Yes, Halloween season. So there is another creepy critter, terrifying dude by the name of Michael that is creeping around in the Gulf of Mexico right now, threatening the coast of Florida. We got a lot of friends over there in that neck of the woods. So, folks, y'all hang on tight, put the beer on ice, make sure you got plenty of batteries and candles, and you will be in our thoughts and prayers because we know what Cat 3s are all about. That sucks. Yes, Freddie, I hate that you won't be there. Cool. I'll be looking out for that. I don't know if I'll catch it live, but I'll definitely go back and look at it later. That's my boy Freddie. You can catch his stream Saturdays on Kaz Magic Arts. I know you renamed your group, Kaz Magic. What? Put a post or link up there for me, Freddie. And you can also catch it on the Southern Horror Queen Horde because Freddie is cool enough to post all of his cool stuff on our Queen Horde site. Okay, so we're going to get rolling with our typical creepy stuff, but a couple of shouts out to the Adrian's Fury Dragster sponsors, Amelie Oll, D&M Graphics, Surreal Studios, Racers Direct, RJ Racing Equipment, Canon Filters, and of course, my lethal favorite, Naked Wines. Yes, indeed, I've got a Merlot tonight, slipping back into the red season with fall upon us, and it's a little bit more like Halloween with that red glow to it, right? Love it. Also, tonight's episode of the Twisted Southern Horror Queen stream is being brought to you by our demented little friends over at the lineup. Those are the guys that cram all the creepy stuff into the creepy crate and ship that out to all of us horror fanatics every other month. Yes, indeed. There's a new crate coming out real soon. Oh, my God. I can't wait to see what's in it, folks. It's going to be the October crate. So, dear God, I don't know how they could get any more stuff in those little boxes or any more creepy stuff in those little boxes. But I am looking forward to see what they pull off this time. There is my boy, John Baring. John, I noticed that you posted a picture of Grand Isle earlier. Is that current? Is that because of Michael being in the Gulf that Grand Isle is currently underwater? Give me a shout out. Let me know. I'm just very curious. If that's the case, then dear God, we're all in for it here on the Gulf coastline, right? Also, before we get rolling tonight, I saw a news line that I just had to share with you guys. I swear to God, this was a real news broadcast from a local station today. We give you guys the rundown. You're gonna freaking love this. Okay, so this dude in Louisiana was arrested last week after he called 911 to report that he had been hit in the head with an axe, and then he claimed that a ghost left meth at his house. Michael Ottenberry, 59, was arrested Wednesday on suspicion of possession of a controlled and dangerous substance, not his brain, criminal mischief, and giving a false report to police. Investigators with Wauketa Parish Sheriff's Office said deputies responded to a home in Monroe, Louisiana, where Ottenberry reported he was hit in the head with an axe. Ottenberry began cursing at the deputies when they arrived, so the deputies placed him in handcuffs because he wasn't cooperating. Ottenberry told the deputies that there were intruders in his room, and when the deputies searched, they found an open brown paper bag with approximately a gram of what they believed was meth on a nightstand. The deputies also found a pill bottle with approximately a gram of what they also believed was methamphetamine on Ottenberry. Officials said that he told the deputies that either a ghost or intruders placed the meth on him, also telling the officers that the intruders were currently climbing out of a nearby window, which the deputies found not true. Ottenberry was then taken to the Waukita Correctional Center. Y'all don't know how we roll down here in Louisiana. Yes, indeed, that was a real headline. You gotta love it, huh? Hey, Tom Bramiana's joined. There's one of my homeboys right there. Good evening, Miss Lynn. Just finished doing some evaluations of platforms. Yeah, I bet you're very busy. Hey, Trey, there's my buddy. How are you doing, honey? Ronnie and Lori Owens are in the house, and there's my bud Gavin Williams. Glad to see all you guys. Dear God, John Bering said, yes, that was a current photo of Grand Isle, Louisiana. The storm surge already has it flooded. Yes, great ghost story with the meth there. So, yeah, the devil made me do it. I guess didn't cross his mind. He had to blame it on a ghost. You got to love it. Hey, Derek, glad to see you joining in tonight. So we're fixing to get rolling with all kind of crazy stuff. And I figured that it had been a while since we talked serial killers. So, yep, I'm starting us out with a couple of demented and twisted individuals. So, yeah, these bastards are really just out of the box. This one dude named Robert Bedella was dubbed the Butcher of Kansas City. You guys might not have heard about him. He's not one of the more publicized serial killers. I really don't know why not, because there's a hell of a little story behind him. So everybody that knew Robert pretty much said that he was your typical everyday friendly guy. And they say that about pretty much all of these demented bastards, don't they? Yeah. Anyway, on April 2nd, 1988, this dude's cover was blown big time. So it's the day before Easter, and the sleepy little neighborhood of Hyde Park in Kansas City was about to get a big surprise. And let me tell you, I'm not talking about the Easter Bunny here, folks. Imagine their shock when this naked dude wearing nothing but a dog collar around his neck leaped from the second-story window of Berdella's house. It was a neighbor that eventually runs across him, crouched behind a chair on his front porch. So, of course, after he finishes freaking out, he calls 911. Well, when the authorities get there, they didn't really know what to expect. They were probably figuring some nut job had just escaped from the insane asylum or something. But then this dude wearing the dog collar and nothing else starts telling the cops what had happened to him. And they realized at that point that they were fixing to have one of the worst days in their career of law enforcement. So this naked dude tells them that he just escaped Berdella's house, where he'd been being held against his will. And after he described some of the deranged stuff that had been being done to him, the police had plenty of cause to go bust down the door on this rather unassuming little white wood-framed house. When they did, they discovered nothing short of a torture dungeon like something straight out of a horror movie, y'all. When they get inside this house, the police found more than 200 Polaroid photos and detailed torture logs documenting the kidnapping, torture, and eventual murder of at least 6 men. Most of them had been male prostitutes. Between 1984 and 1988 is when this dude was getting his crazy on. So the authorities start seizing these torture devices. They also found an extensive library on witchcraft and the occult, a satanic ritual robe, a human skull that they found upstairs in the closet, and all kind of really crazy stuff. Then they really start digging. I mean, literally. That weekend, the Berdella's neighbors were all woke up by blue lights and the sound of excavating equipment in this dude's backyard. And it's a good thing they weren't digging for treasure, because that's definitely not what they found. Among all these gory discoveries were bone fragments and an additional human head. Now, the neighbors were absolutely floored. These folks had considered Bordella a nice man who just pretty much kept to himself. So this dude had actually started a neighborhood watch program there. He'd worked as a chef, and he ran his own booth at the Westport Flea Market. His little booth was called Bob's Bazaar. And it really should have thrown up some serious red flags at that time, because this dude was selling everything from human skulls and shrunken heads to occult books and antiques and all kind of other satanic whatnots. So even though this dude was either brazen or stupid enough to sell this kind of crazy shit in this little shop, he was smart enough to beat most of the charges at first. Now, despite the overwhelming and gruesome evidence found in Bordella's Hyde Park home, it was initially only charged with sodomy and felonious restraint and first-degree assault. And it took a little while for the authorities to realize the extent of Bordella's crimes, because the majority of his victims' bodies were never found. The list of atrocities that this dude subjected his victims to would fit right into the scripts of movies like Saw or Hostel. Some of these bizarre tortures included applying bleach to his victims' eyes with cotton swabs, injecting their vocal cords with drain cleaner, and he gouged this one dude's eye out just to see what would happen. Anyway, once his victims were dead, he would dismember the bodies in his bathtub and then put the body parts in the garbage bag for the garbage men. Those dudes just really don't get paid enough. Anyway, if the seventh victim hadn't escaped, there'd be no telling how many more there could have been. Now, once Bordella's case became public knowledge, folks began to suspect that he had cooked and served some of his victims as food in his shop. Footnote here, folks. Never, ever buy a box to lunch from a dude that's selling human skulls. Twisted Southern Horror Queen told you that, so you know it's got to be true. All right, so after his arrest, Bordella admitted that his inspiration for all this insanity was a 1965 film called The Collector. This film, of course, 65, it was kind of basic, probably some really good acting, and of course no effects or anything, but it was basically run along the same lines of kidnapping and torture and all those kind of crazy little things. And then this little freak of nature said that his crimes were actually his darkest fantasies becoming reality. A lot of folks choose Disneyland. Anyway, in one of the only interviews that he ever gave before his death, Bordella said that he was none too happy about the media coverage of his murders. He felt that he was being dehumanized. I wonder how his victims would have felt about that. Anyway, Bordella went on to describe himself as the neighbor next door who had just reached a point in his life where he could do monstrous acts. And that's not exactly the same thing as being a monster. So he said. Anyway, Robert Bordella died of a heart attack in prison in 1992 after he was writing letters claiming the prison officials weren't giving him his heart medication. Other accounts have since implied that Bordella was poisoned while he was behind bars, but no official investigation of his death was ever conducted. So let's talk about a couple of these unfortunate bastards that encountered Bordella and became his victims. 20-year-old Larry Pearson made the fatal mistake of stopping by Bordella's booth at this flea market. He wound up being held captive for 6 weeks and subjected to daily acts of torture, including electric shock, sodomy with vegetables, and repeated whippings. I'm going to leave that alone. On August 4th, 1987, after being in prison for more than 5 weeks, Pearson had finally had enough of the horrifying abuse, so he bit Bordella's penis when he was forced to perform oral sex. Pearson nearly severed Bordella's penis, and the dude had to go to the hospital to get his shit stitched back together. Wonder how he explained that to the doctors. Well, Bordella was informed that he was going to have to be admitted for surgery. So he tells the doctors that he's got to go home and take care of his dogs real quick, and he'd be back. So he went home, and he murdered Pearson. Then he went back to the hospital to get his willy rearranged. Anyway, after taking the lives of at least 6 young men, Robert Berdella was finally captured thanks to the brave actions of that last victim, 22-year-old Chris Bryson. That's the naked dude wearing the dog collar. After subjecting Bryson to 5 days of torture, on April 4th, 1988, Berdella left his prisoner tied up in an upstairs bedroom while he went to work for the day. Well, Bryson managed to get his hands on a pack of matches, which he used to burn through the ropes that Berdella had tied around his wrists. That's when he jumped from the second-story window and ran to the home of one of Berdella's neighbors. Well, when Berdella returned from Bob's Bizarre Bazaar that day, the police were waiting to arrest this 39-year-old freak of nature for sexual assault. Berdella really got his rocks off by inflicting pain on his victims, and many of them had been bound around their wrists with rope, and of course he used leashes and dog collars to restrain them. Berdella subjected his victims to painful electric shocks that he used by administering a 7,700-watt transformer, so they say. He also enjoyed using caustic chemicals, like the bleach we were talking about earlier. He kept his prisoners from screaming by placing gags in their mouth or injecting that drain cleaner into their vocal cords. However, his most disturbing act of torture was his practice of sodomizing his victims with his fists. Yes, we went there on the Twisted Southern Horror Queen show this week. Let's see who else chimed in. There's Teresa Campbell. Hey, Teresa, glad to see you. Chris Moody, fun fact, after Ted Bundy was arrested by Officer David Lee, my dad was the cop that transported Bundy to the hospital to get his bumps and bruises looked at. That's freaky, Chris. I bet you there's all kind of other stories that he could tell us about that as well. Gavin said, I think that I read about the butcher before. Yes, indeed, Gavin. He has made his way around. Hey, Jody, glad to see you. Look at you rocking it. Yep, that's me rocking it. Who else have we got chiming in there before we carry on? We've got Susie Jones, which we will be seeing this week at Gulf Coast Fan Fest. Leslie Ashley's in the house as well. And who else? That's it? No, Andrew Armstrong is also there. Andrew, I have been showing off that picture that you sent me. I am so excited about that. Thank you so much for thinking of me. And hey, J. Lee McConnell, glad you're joining in. Let's talk a second about Gulf Coast Fan Fest. Yes, Susie and Mike Jones are the keepers of the Christine movie car. Them, as well as the owner, Bill Gibson, will be joining us at Gulf Coast Fan Fest with the Adrian's Fury Dragster and Big Johnny Blender. There is a freaking ton of celebrities that are going to be there. The list has grown so incredibly. I couldn't even begin to start making those rounds down the list. So if you are anywhere near the Biloxi, Mississippi Gulf Coast, come check us out this weekend. It's going to be a freaking blast. They're actually giving me a panel this year. I'm not sure if they know what they're in for. That's going to be incredible. They wanted me to talk about world building. I informed them that my world is a very dark and creepy place. I guess they'll be well versed in that by the end of the weekend. All right, so like I said, hey, all those folks that are evacuating from Florida, head this way and meet us out at Gulf Coast Fan Fest. Screw Michael. There's going to be plenty of Michaels there at Gulf Coast Fan Fest. Michael Myers, that is, definitely. Oh, speaking of Michael Myers, we'll also be in E-Town at the end of the month where they are attempting to beat the Guinness World Record of the most people dressed as Michael Myers at a horror convention. So are you anywhere in the Kentucky area? Throw on your Michael Myers gear and come on out. Be one of those numbers. We got to get in the Guinness World Book of Records. That's going to be freaking awesome. Gavin says, I love reading horror and haunted stories. Is there anything else to read, Gavin? Not that I'm aware of. All right, so as if that wasn't enough, we do have one more serial killer that we're going to brush on just quickly because Why do just one? You know, we're in Louisiana over here, folks. Lagniappe, that means more than one. That means extra. That means more. Jason, glad to see you. He is chiming in from Galveston, Texas. Texas boys in the house. Hey, Ronnie and Lori Owens aren't too far from me. I don't think they are in Katy, Texas. They're also watching the stream live. You guys should hook up. All right, so there is a hair somewhere around my mouth. But anyway, so that's enough about Burdella. We do have a little bit more on the twisted serial killers plane that I want to tell you guys about. So let's go here. What's the first thing that crosses your mind when you think of Germany? Okay, let's say the second thing, because if you're like me, the first thing that crosses my mind is Hitler. So the second thing should be sausage, right? And yeah, after talking about Burdella, different sausage, people, get your mind out of the gutter. So yeah, sausage and Germany pretty much go together like peanut butter and jelly. Unfortunately, this serial killer has made the connection between sausage and Germany even more memorable. You know where I'm going with this, don't you? Yeah. So this demented bastard named Karl Dinky made a name for himself after World War I. See, back in the day, life was really tough and money and food were hard to come by. So this dude, Dinky, who played the organ at his local church, was a very well-respected man in the community. And come to find out, he was one hell of an entrepreneur as well. This dude came up with the perfect solution for most of the problems that were plaguing his community. A lot of folks had become homeless and they were starving to death out in the streets because there was a lack of food. And of course, there was a lack of cash, and either or, you ain't got no money, you're not going to buy any food. If you got money and there's no food to buy, you're still up shit creek, right? Well, Dinky would go out in the streets and he'd gather up these homeless folks, and under the guise of brotherly love, he'd invite them into his home where he promised them a place to warm up and a nice warm bed and, of course, a hot meal. And out of desperation, these starving targets would be stupid not to accept his seemingly generous invitation, right? But these poor, oblivious bastards had no idea of the horrific fate that was awaiting them. Yeah. So Dinky would take these folks into his home and he'd murder them. So one problem was solved. Less homeless folks out on the street starving to death, right? Then on to part two of his master plan. Dinky would butcher their bottoms and make sausage that he'd sell to these poor, unsuspecting customers of his. Problem two solved. He's got cash flow now, right? So by the time everything was said and done, Dinky murdered over 40 people by December 20th, 1924. But that would bring his macabre little enterprise to a screeching halt. That day, this dude goes stumbling into the local police department with a massive head wound. Actually was caused by an axe. And no, Dinky did not put any meth on the dude. If you guys that weren't tuning in at the beginning of the show, you'll be completely lost. Go back after the live broadcast and check that out. It'll only take you for a second. You'll laugh your ass off, I promise. Anyway, this dude stated that he had been attacked by Dinky at his house. Well, when the authorities arrived, his gig was up and they arrived. 2 days later, Karl Dinky hanged himself in his cell. Now, Dinky wasn't the only serial killer in Germany. This dude, Karl Grossman's story of murder and mayhem was pretty similar to that of Karl Dinky. Grossman earned his nickname, the Berlin Butcher, after he was nabbed by police in Berlin in 1921. Grossman's neighbors heard this chick screaming for help in his apartment, so they called the law in, right? Well, when the police get there, they find the body of a newly murdered woman laying in his bed, and they arrest the dude. Well, the neighbors come forward, and they start telling the police that over the past few years, a whole lot of women that apparently look like crack hoes, according to their descriptions. Anyway, these chicks had gone into Grossman's apartment, but nobody ever saw them leave. So the authorities start their investigation, and it didn't take long before the whole story of Karl Grossman's macabre crimes start coming to light. It became apparent that over the course of a few years, Grossman had murdered, dismembered, and cannibalized a shit ton of women. So, like Carl Demke, Grossman sold disguised human meat to customers from his hot dog stand at a train station in Berlin. Mustard or ketchup? So anyway, Grossman was tried, convicted, and sentenced to death. Again, also like Demke, Grossman hanged himself in his prison cell on July 5th in 1922. Well, we're just all about the sausage and hot dogs and all kind of madness tonight, right? Yeah, that's how we roll here. Let's see if I can scroll down and see what's going on. Susie said yes. Norman, I am watching from Dubai. Cool, Norman. Love it. Hope you're enjoying the stream. Ricky Siebert is in the house from Kansas. Hey, Ricky. Actually, I've tried looking into some of the legends that you're trying to hook me up with. I'm getting a little bit here and there, so it's going to take me some time because I'm very interested in it. But be patient with me. I like to do the research. Gavin said he wishes he could head down from Canada to any of the cons. I wish you could too, Gavin. Jane says she loves my room. This is the Lady Loft, Jane. I love it too. Thank you. Hey, Cody Hollers is in the house. There's my boy from the 405. Let's see, Wayla Dooley, there's my sweetness from Washington Parish. Jason Allison said, yuck, I'm not sure, but I'm thinking that's probably because of the sausage or the hot dogs, could be either or. There is Jamie Vaccaro, which is known otherwise as my little diva. All right, so catching up on my comments there on the side, and we are rolling on with more creepy stories for the evening, but I got to take just 1 second for a little refreshment. Bear with me. Yummy. All right, so let's lighten up just a little bit and talk about some toys, in particular dolls, like haunted dolls. Yeah. We've talked about some of the well-known dolls like Annabelle and Robert. We've definitely talked about those legends before in the past. If you'd like to see those blogs, go to authorlyngibson.com, and there on the home page you can hook up with my blogs, pull that up, and search out Annabelle or Robert the doll, and you can read all kind of madness that surrounds them. But tonight we're not going to go there. We're going to talk about a couple of dolls that aren't so well known and give them a little press tonight. This one doll in particular is kept at the Museum of Shadows in Nebraska. Nate and Kaylee Raderman are a couple of paranormal experts who own this Museum of Shadows in Nebraska. And according to their website, their museum is the most haunted museum in the Midwest. The building is full of obscure and haunted artifacts. But they say the most haunted attraction there is a doll that they call Ada. Now, Ada is a rare 27-inch doll who was made in 1889 in Germany. Boy, we're just all over Germany tonight, aren't we? By Simon and Halbig. Now, she was passed down over the years and eventually ended up at some point in a home full of negativity and all kind of bad energies, and apparently a lot of hate and violence and things that were going on there. So all these things apparently rubbed off on this little doll, and she became a hellion after that. Well, this family that inherited her tried to get rid of the doll after she started making everybody in the house very uncomfortable, but it wasn't going to go down that easy. These folks threw her away, but she came back. What the hell? Yeah, you heard me right. This doll went to the local landfill for 2 years, which was nearly 20 miles away from these folks' house. But then she came back, minus her eyeballs. They find her in the garage sitting on top of a bag of fertilizer. So they man up and try to toss her out again. But she climbs out of the bag. So now this family's freaking the hell out. And that's when they donated her to Nate and Kaylee. So the Radermans go and they decide they're going to pick the doll up. Well, they're driving back to the museum and they start hearing all these weird noises coming from the back seat where the doll is. Suddenly they hear this deep whisper that says, "I want out," followed by the sound of a crying child. Needless to say, Nate and Kaylee have taken some pretty stringent precautions in keeping Ada confined to her display case. But no matter what they do, everybody that lays eyes on this doll says that they become filled with fear and dread immediately. Nate says that it has become increasingly difficult to keep Ada dormant. Then they started adding even more precautions. Nate told these folks in an interview that there were a few things he was doing that probably weren't as typical as what you would expect. He said, "When I have to move her, I wear a hazmat suit, and I can still feel power seeping through the suit from her. I like to call it a paranormal hangover because she makes me feel sick and gives me the worst migraine ever. So now we've placed her in a permanent box, and it's locked, and the keys are off location to protect us from any chance of her ever getting out." So Ada is pretty creepy, and apparently there's more than one little thing that has attached itself to Ada. Now, there's another not so highly commercialized haunted doll, and her name is Caroline. Now, nobody knows where Caroline originally came from, but she eventually ended up in this antique shop in Salem, Massachusetts. So she's thought to be possessed by 3 different ghosts that fight over control of the doll. And supposedly, if you hold her close enough to your ear, she'll whisper all kinds of things to you. Now, legend says that she contains the souls of these 3 previous owners, and their spirits were passed on to Caroline because each of them supposedly adored this doll. Even though she's been showered with affection, the doll is very restless and has all kind of weird vibes around it. Now, these 3 spirits that inhabit her are in constant turmoil, and each of them are consistently fighting for control over this doll. Then there's this other little doll, and her name's Amanda. Now, Amanda, no, I'm not going to go there. This little doll has been sold at least 20 times, and let me tell you a little bit about her. She was created in 1884 by a toy company named Hendrick and Handwerk in Germany, which makes her well over 100 years old. Now, one of her former owners that purchased her on eBay was ecstatic with the deal that she got, but she didn't feel that way for very long. So this chick that bought her said she felt like the doll had some kind of mind control over her. She thought about Amanda all day, every day, but on those days that she could manage to distract herself and put Amanda out of her mind, she paid the price later. This owner said that the doll would haunt her dreams and spur these just terrifying nightmares. So one night she wakes up because her feet are freezing cold, and she reaches over and turns on the light and looks down to her feet, and she sees that they are covered in scratches and deep gashes. So she manages to get out of bed, wrap her feet up, and drive herself to the hospital. But when she got there, all the cuts were gone. So when she gets home, she finds Amanda sitting in a chair with a shit-eating grin on her face, not where she had been left. So immediately she relisted Amanda on eBay that very night. Well, it wasn't very long before the doll was being shipped off again to a new owner, but within a week after Amanda arrived, she was again relisted on eBay. Now, today, Amanda belongs to a paranormal investigator in Atlanta, Georgia, that keeps her locked up in a glass case. Both the new owner and several witnesses have reported hearing scratching sounds coming from that case at night, because apparently Amanda doesn't like being locked up. Now, this next little doll isn't for sale, and I guess I can understand why. Now, Joliet has been passed down for 4 generations from mother to daughter in this family. Now, each daughter that's been given this doll will have 2 children, a son and a daughter. The son will die within 3 days after he's born in every single case. The family believes that the souls of those dead sons are somehow trapped inside of Joliet, and they claim to hear their cries coming from this doll in the middle of the night. So why the hell would you keep handing the doll down when you know what's going to happen? Well, that was my thoughts anyway. But these people believe, and I got to admit, it makes a little bit of sense to me. The family is really terrified to think of what would happen to both themselves and the trapped souls of those boys should the doll be damaged or destroyed. Now, at the moment, the doll is in possession of an heir named Anna, who has had 2 children, a son and a daughter. The son, as you have probably already guessed, died within 3 days after being born. Okay, so if a relative tries to give you a doll that's been handed down from generation to generation in your family, do a little research before you accept it. I'm just saying, you never really know. So let me see if I can catch up over here. What's going on? Janlene Swooden is, oh, I lost it. Watching from the UK. Awesome. Lyndon Whitted, good to see you in the house tonight. Jody Parker says, hey. Andrew says, shoot me an address later, ready to send. Oh, that's freaking awesome. You made my night, Andrew. Kenneth Ryder has just joined. Hey, Kenny, glad to see you in the house tonight, hanging out with the Twisted Southern Horror Queen. Melissa Palmer is also in the house. Lyndon says, have you read the snow story out of the Erath County, Chalk Mountain, Texas? Check it out. I'll do that, Lyndon. Sounds cool. Gavin says he remembers reading about a doll from Japan that needs a haircut. I've actually seen something about that, Gavin. I'll have to look that up because I'd forgotten about that. Jane said, just wanted to say hi. Thanks. I'm enjoying your show. Thank you so much, Jane. Sammy Overstreet. Hi, girl. Tuning in for a second. Just got to get back to hurricane prep. Sammy, my prayers and my thoughts are with you, honey. Glenn Harrison has joined. There's my boy Glenn from Hardcore Paranormal, a sister site, I would guess. There was all kind of crazy ghost stories and legends and urban legends and UFOs and all kind of madness going on over there. You guys check out Hardcore Paranormal when you get a chance. Definitely. All right, so we're rolling on tonight. This is what Gavin's been looking forward to. We're talking about some different kind of dolls tonight. You know, something that's fairly common to us folks that live here in the deep South. Figure out what that was yet? I opened the show with one last week. Voodoo dolls, right? Yeah, you guys have heard about voodoo dolls. Now, most folks are under the impression that these little darlings were created by Creole slaves in New Orleans. Well, though they're still widely used in these parts today, I got to tell you, voodoo dolls are not native to Louisiana or Africa or Haiti for that matter. In fact, the history of the voodoo doll actually goes back to 1100 BC. Now, of course, it wasn't called a voodoo doll back then, but just think back to the pharaohs and the pyramids, y'all. There's a story about a treasury official and the women of Pharaoh Ramses II's harem who worked together to make this wax image of the pharaoh to bring about his death. Voodoo doll. So yeah, there's been evil intent behind these little images for centuries. However, sometimes they were actually used for healing or for blessing rituals. They weren't always shrouded in evil. Now, for centuries, man has been creating these little sweethearts out of cloth or hay or stick or stone or pretty much anything we can get our hands on, right? Well, these little dolls sometimes look like they're intended targets, and sometimes they don't resemble anybody or anything in the slightest. Now, in European history, these effigies were known as poppets. They were also created out of whatever was laying around, hay, material, mud, whatever the case may be. But the cloth ones grew popular in rituals. Now, the body of these cloth dolls would be stuffed with healing herbs, along with fingernails or hair clippings of the person that they were intended to help or hurt, depending on the type of ritual that was going down, right? So as time progressed, the voodoo dolls evolved into tokens that were mostly used with evil intent. Enter the Crescent City influence. Now, voodoo originated in the islands of Haiti, but in their practice, there had been no dolls. So these little suckers are the result of intermingling legend and religion, and what came to be of that? New Orleans voodoo, right? So voodoo dolls were popular among the slaves. Some thought that making the dolls and sticking them with pins was one way to lash out at their masters. Now, these white plantation owners, mostly of European descent, were scared shitless of this practice. More often than not, the voodoo doll was used as a weapon against other believers in voodoo. And let me tell you, these folks did not hesitate to use it. And you bet your sweet asses they got the results they were looking for. Now, these primitive looking little dolls were usually wrapped with twine or catgut and stuck through with everything from pins to fish bones. And of course, they've been unearthed on several plantations here in southern Louisiana. So voodoo dolls were being left on doorsteps all over New Orleans back in the day. The idea of using them combined with other forms of hexes like gris-gris and mojo had reached its peak during the reign of the infamous voodoo queen of New Orleans, Her Highness Marie Laveau. Each one of these legends back in the 19th century in New Orleans are filled with these tales of victims of this dark magic, right? Well, each of them, after waking from nightmares, would find bones and graveyard dust and a creepy little voodoo doll laying on their porch steps, placed there during the pitch of night by Miss Marie Laveau herself. These tales would be easy to file away as local lore if it wasn't for the fact that nearly all the voodoo Marie Laveau performed actually worked. Sometimes just the mere suspicion that Marie Laveau had someone in her sights would be enough to cause physical or emotional collapse. And sometimes the fear alone, according to some accounts, was often followed by actual death. Now, the power possessed by Marie Laveau is still at work in the voodoo practiced in New Orleans today, and the tradition of the voodoo doll is still alive and well. So if you ever piss me off and I snatch a handful of hair out of your head, you can't even run or hide, folks. Just kidding. Maybe. So what goes into these dolls that give them so much power? Well, you ever heard of the expression baked with love? It's kind of like that, except not. When somebody orders a voodoo doll, the creator will focus vengeful and angry energies into the materials as it's being constructed. So depending on the task of the doll, it could take hours or weeks. For example, your boss has been up your ass for days and you really just want to tell him to get bent. He's not a bad guy, and you kind of like him, but right now he's on your last freaking nerve, right? So you go and order a voodoo doll to help you focus your energies. Now, you don't want him dead or anything, but a week of violent diarrhea would help keep him home and locked in a bathroom. Thus, he's off your ass, right? That doll can be put together basically in a day. Now, on the other hand, if you're wanting to exact your revenge on somebody who's really hurt you, I mean, devastated and destroyed you, that doll's going to take a little bit longer. Not to say that it would be better for you to do this yourself, but just imagine the person that's making the doll has an understanding of the purpose of this doll, but they, they're not making the doll for themselves. And if you're the one that's actually feeling the pain and you cast all those energies into the doll yourself, that's going to be one powerful little token right there. So, yeah, just imagine the hate and anger that could be woven into that doll. Pretty intense, right? Yeah. These little bastards can be anything from good luck tokens to the harbingers of a painful and agonizing death. Sometimes the evil intent of the one that created them is so strong that it actually attracts evil. You know that old saying, evil begets evil? Yeah, right. Well, there's a recent story about a cursed voodoo doll that I ran across. And I want to tell you guys about it. It's kind of crazy. So, hey, Galveston, Texas. This chick in Galveston, Texas bought a real haunted New Orleans zombie voodoo doll on eBay on October 4th, 2004. So it shows up at her doorstep, and she opens the box and sees what she describes as a metal box that had been bound by twine. And she thinks this is just window dressing, right? So she unties the twine and takes this little creepy looking curio, opens it up and pulls out the doll because she wants to put her newest little novelty on display. Now, in her own words, that was a big mistake because that's when the weird shit starts happening. This doll would move around the house, and it was never ever where she last left it. There were times when the doll actually even attacked her, causing small but very deep gashes on her ankles and her lower legs. So now this chick is literally afraid for her life. So she grabs the doll, she crams it back into the metal box that it came in, and even though she knew that the doll was restrained in its box, she got no peace. Every single night she was tormented by these horrible nightmares that were so terrifying that they continued haunting her during the daytime. Now this chick's living in fear, and now she's to the point of mental exhaustion. She decides that she's going to destroy this doll. First, she tries to burn it. It wouldn't burn. So then she tries to cut it up, but the knife and the scissors broke. So, as a last resort, she tries burying it in a cemetery. But that didn't seem to work either, because as she tells it, the doll's grave was just too shallow because it appeared the next morning lying dirty on her front doorstep. Yeah. So now she's desperate to get rid of this evil little doll, so she sells it on eBay. Well, a few weeks later, the buyer wrote her to tell her that the doll had disappeared from her home. Guess what? It shows back up. Yep, it's on this chick's front doorstep. So she boxes it back up and sends it back to the purchaser. Not long after that, she finds it on her doorstep again. So she ships it back to the purchaser again. And the third time it happened, the buyer called her and told her that the box had arrived empty. Again, guess where the doll shows up? Yeah, that's right. So, folks, all of this really could have been avoided if she just read the directions. The original eBay seller said that this haunted zombie doll was very active and almost alive. It went on to say that the new owner had to follow the rules, keeping it hidden away and never open the silver box it was locked in, not to even sneak a quick peek. Well, this dumb bitch thought that all this was just too unreal, so she thought the warnings were amusing and a corny little selling tactic. Guess what? She found out a little different, right? So now this chick was actually in the process of getting into ghost hunting. She thought it'd be a great little piece for her to investigate, even if it wasn't really haunted. But to her surprise, it was more than haunted, and the little bastard seemed to be possessed. So she tries getting in touch with the person in New Orleans that she'd originally bought it from, but her emails weren't returned. She even packed it up and sent it back to the address that it had originally shipped from, but the package came back with an attachment that read, "Resident Deceased." So she called in 3 different paranormal groups. 2 showed up, but after examining the doll, they said there was nothing that they could do to help her. After countless emails to all that is paranormal on the internet, including Art Bell and George Norrie Coast to Coast AM, none have answered her or even tried to get in touch. Now, when she had tried to contact a local radio station, they told her story on Halloween of 2006. And several callers to the show told her to seek out a priest, which she did. So the priest who visited her was shown this large antique silver box that the haunted voodoo doll was kept in. She begged him not to open it, just to take her word on it. So he blessed the box, and he asked to hold the evil spirit locked inside to stay there for forever for her. So others offered to take it off her hands, but no one has ever called or showed up. Now, people seem to think she's crazy, but she knows that she's not. And she keeps the doll locked away, hidden up in her attic. And one day she says she will sell her home and move elsewhere. And maybe if she's lucky, she'll leave the haunted doll tucked away in the attic. And no one will ever find it or let it out again. All right, let me catch up on my comments again. See what's going on with all you creepy kids. Hi, James. Glad to see you. He is from Philadelphia. Very cool. Jane said she shared. Thank you, Jane. I appreciate that. Gavin says he's reading about the voodoo. Hi, Lynn from Jenny in Tablelands, Queensland, Australia. Very cool, Jenny. Australia. You guys have some vampire legends over there in your neck of the woods I'm a little bit familiar with. Ha. Kim Maddox, hello, sweetheart. I am sending out invoices next week for Dark Man, so be prepared to have your world rock. Let's see. Gavin says he has templates of voodoo dolls. Very cool. Don't make those, though. They'll get you in a lot of trouble. Great show tonight. We do a lot of stuff on haunted and possessed dolls for some reason. I love it, these tales. That's my boy, Glenn. Richard Thorne, hi. Glad to see you. Chua Eileen, I do play Ouija board, but it doesn't work for me, perhaps because I play alone. Never play the Ouija board alone. That's a no-no. Actually, it's just better to stay away from a Ouija board altogether. Richard says he's from Chicago. That's awesome. I've been to Chicago quite a few years ago, though. And Chua says they are from the Philippines. I actually had an aunt that lived over there in the Philippines. Very cool. Okay, so now we've got one more little legend we're going to talk about. I teased you guys with the poppet thing. I didn't know if any of you had ever heard of a poppet or had any freaking idea what that is, but I'm fixing to hook you up with a cool little tale, and that way you will. Oh, that is so yummy. You guys have got to check out Naked Wands. Still have those $100 vouchers. If you want one, shoot me a message. I'll be happy to send you the code. Free shipping. $100 off your first order. Awesome one. All right, so next up, a tale or two maybe about poppets. Now, we did talk about these a very long time ago, but I've got a lot of new people following this show, so you guys might not have heard about it. It's kind of basically the same as a voodoo doll, but there's this one in particular that travels with the Museum of the Paranormal and Occult. And I actually got a chance to see those guys a year or so ago at one of the horror cons that we attended. I'm looking at the posters of horror cons that we've been at on our wall. May have been the Horror Con of Mississippi, if I'm not mistaken. So back in Illinois, sometime between 1980 and 1985, routine maintenance was going on at this old barn. Well, when this makeshift little doll was found, it was hidden up in the lofts. Nobody had a clue of who could have put it there or why. So these folks were kind of intrigued by the mystery of this little doll. And the young farmer pried it from the wall and brought it home with him to share with his with his family and all. And of course, they became a wee bit concerned when he came home with it. As a matter of fact, his mother came unbolted. Now, when she finally catches her breath and calms down, she tells him that what he had found there and brought into her home was called a poppet. And poppets were known to be very powerful form of magic that were intended to cause serious harm to a specific target. Well, wasn't very long before things started going downhill then. So this farm started experiencing a strange spate of cattle deaths and equipment failures, and the farmer's father became terribly ill at that point. The farmer himself couldn't help but note the amount of recent close calls that he had had during doing just simple everyday chores. These coincidences and instances from his superstitious family members were more than enough to convince him that this poppet might very well be to blame for all this freaking bad luck, right? Well, now it's pretty apparent that they had actually been the intended target. And with a lack of options, the farmer and his family prayed over the poppet, and they crammed it into a bag and stored it in an unused tool drawer where it sat for the next 3 decades. So this poppet was recently rediscovered and gifted to these guys at the Traveling Museum of the Paranormal and Occult, where it provides a glimpse into American folk magic in its purest form. So some people claim that they've even felt a pulsing energy radiating from the object. And this was actually one of those relics that Dana and Greg did have with them at the HorrorCon of Mississippi when I met up with them. And I can definitely tell you that standing anywhere in the vicinity of this poppet, there was a very foreboding and, I don't know, very strong sensation that came from it. There were a couple of relics that they had with them at that con that definitely threw up a few flags. You could feel all kind of crazy stuff going on with them. So my hat's off to Greg and Dana, because they keep all these little tokens and trinkets in line, and all these critters behaving. So I know that takes a whole lot to maintain and take care of all of those kind of little creepy kids, because I got a few little creepy kids hanging around here. But they're my buddies, and they seem to watch out for me. Who else is chiming in? We're coming to the end of the show. Let's see if it's actually going to let me scroll down. Maybe Joe. Hey, nice to see you. There is Ernest Falcon. Chug that drink. You got it, sweetness. I'll definitely do that. Trust me, that glass will be empty in just a couple of seconds. All right, so in the meanwhile, we may be doing a few live broadcasts from Gulf Coast Fan Fest in Biloxi at the Gulf Coast Coliseum this weekend. Maybe, maybe not. It depends on how busy or how tied up we get. But in the meanwhile, if you need to get your creepy on before next Tuesday, you can always go to authorlynnGibson.com, where you can find my books, my blogs, pictures from past shows, past interviews, all kinds of crazy stuff. And while you're there, go all the way to the right-hand side of the page, where you'll see a tab that says The Edge Radio US. If you like your rock cranking and badass, we can hook you up. There's 2 links there on the page where you can stream live or download the free Android app and take your badass rock and roll with you wherever you go. In the meanwhile, all you folks keep it creepy, and I will do my very best to do the same. I will see you guys soon. All you folks that are fixing to be bracing yourself for Michael, you're in my thoughts and prayers. Y'all hang tight. Hang on to something.